Alright, so here we are, Passion Week. We've heard James's sermon on Sunday about the triumphal return of Jesus into Jerusalem, and just the anxiousness that people had, and the promise being fulfilled. And you've got everybody shouting Hosanna, Hosanna, and Jesus knew that this promise was being fulfilled, and the people kind of knew, and Jesus knew that some of those people who were shouting Hosanna a few days later would be the same people who are going to be shouting crucify him. We've got a day later Jesus going to the temple and clearing the temple and taking a stand against sin and just the injustice in the temple, and we see where Jesus becomes angry and he clears the temple out, and that's where the plot really begins to kill Jesus. The Pharisees have had enough, and they know that this is it, this is the time where it's time to take care of the situation. And there's just this anxious feeling of the promise being fulfilled and the Pharisees not wanting it to happen. And a day later we've got Jesus promising his return, and I'm reminded of the story where he walks past the fig tree and he curses it. And when they're leaving the city, they walk past that same fig tree, and Jesus is telling them, you have to have faith. Telling the disciples, you have to truly believe and have no doubt that if you pray to God and truly believe in what you're praying, that God, through anything through God is possible. And that's where Jesus is trying to reaffirm and reassure that his disciples that they have a strong faith, and that no matter what happens in the days ahead, his promises will be fulfilled. And then we have the Last Supper. I can't imagine being in Jesus' shoes, knowing and sitting there and just thinking, this is the last time I'm going to be with you guys, and to know that you're going to deny me, and know that Judas, you're going to betray me, but yet Jesus still loved them. He knew all this and he still loved them. And that's the promise that he's given us, that no matter what we're going through or what we've been through, his promise is true. And he knows that he's going to be denied by some of them, and he knows that he's going to be betrayed, and he still loves them. And that's what God does for us. He still loves us through all this. And then we have the time where Jesus is crucified, and he takes the whole weight of everything on his shoulders and on his body. And those same people that were saying Hosanna, Hosanna as he entered the city are now standing there in the courts, and after he's been beaten and stuff, and yelling crucify him and crucify him. Jesus takes that beating and they're still yelling crucify him. And this is the point where the disciples are scattering, and there's just this anxious feeling of what is happening, what's going on. And he takes that for us. So we're at the point in the Passion Week where Jesus is heading to the tomb, and this is where the promise really is starting to take shape and to take form. And when Jesus was placed in the tomb, there were only just a couple people there waiting for him. It was Mary Magdalene and Mary, and we had John at the foot of the cross, and everybody else is just scattered because there's just this anxious feeling of overcoming them, of what's going on, what's happening. And when I read through Matthew 27 in verses 61 through 66, it says Mary and Mary Magdalene were the ones sitting there opposite of the tomb. And the next day, after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate, and they said, "Sir, we remember how that impostor said, while he was still alive, after 3 days he is going to rise. Therefore order the tomb be made secure until the third day, lest his disciples go and steal him away and tell the people, he has risen from the dead, and the last fraud will be worse than the first." Pilate said to them, "You have a guard of soldiers. Go, make it secure as you can." So they went and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone and setting the guard. So we have everything in place. We have Pilate anxious because he's afraid that the body's going to get stolen. We have Mary Magdalene and Mary anxious because they know that they believe in Jesus and know that he's going to fulfill his promise. And I just can't imagine being that Roman soldier standing there in front of that tomb, hearing what the Pharisees are saying about the body being stolen. And you have the Marys off in the distance just watching and waiting. And I mean, if I was that soldier, every little noise I would be like looking around, just anxious because you don't know what's happening. And in the world that we live in right now, with everything that's going on, it's easy to be anxious about everything and to be on edge about everything. But if we believe in the Bible and believe what it says is true, we don't need to be anxious about everything, but we need to be anxious to someone. And we need to be anxious to Jesus. And as he was laying there, you can see that. We have Mary Magdalene and Mary are anxious for him. And that's what we need to be. We need to be anxious for Jesus.